Hi, Patricia. How are you?
Hi, Johnson. Good. How are you?
I'm well. Greetings from Sydney all the way to Switzerland.
Yes, isn't it wonderful that we can do this beyond distances and events? Yes.
Yeah,
Thank you
so
for
I'm
inviting.
really happy for you to be here and that you had the time to have a little truth, wisdom, freedom conversation with me across how many thousand miles we are apart. And so, yeah, welcome to those of you who are joining us this evening on this episode of Truth, Wisdom, Freedom Conversations. And today we are talking about the unconscious. So, Patricia here is a Jungian psychoanalyst, and she is the author of a book that is called A Jungian Approach to Spontaneous Drawing, A Window on the Soul. And she's based in Switzerland. And today we're really going to investigate from a consciousness perspective what it means to tap into the unconscious. And especially with the climate in the world right now, I associate the unconscious also with the unknown and that which is uncertain. And I would love to start with this beautiful quote from an American psychologist called June Singer. And she talks about the collective unconscious, and this is what she says. She says the wonder of the collective unconscious is that it's all there, all the legends and history of the human race, with its history, its unexorcised demons, and its gentle saints, its mysteries and its wisdom, all within each and every one of us, a microcosm within a macrocosm. The exploration of this world is more challenging than the exploration of outer space. And so that's a pretty big statement. And so I wanted to pick your brain and see how you felt about that first off, and also the role of stories and how that plays into our belief systems and where we are meant to move forward as conscious leaders in society today.
Yes, they're all big questions, aren't they, Johnson? I enjoyed your quote very much. Yes. Jung refers to the unconscious as to the psyche itself as the greatest of all cosmic wonders. So, yes, we have the structure and dynamics in the psyche like we have in anatomy and physiology. Jung's actually the first person who ever described that. So in the anatomy of the psyche, we have the ego, the personal unconscious, the collective unconscious, which is the mind bank of humanity. As you just said in your quote, it's all in there. Everything that's ever been since the night of time is docked in our collective unconscious. So when people begin to dream, they contact the personal unconscious, and then eventually the process simply spontaneously goes deeper. And when they connect with the collective unconscious, then we call it big dreams. The indigenous people all pay attention to dreams, but a big dream was always for everybody, for the whole community. So if someone had a collective unconscious dream, then it was shared.
You worked a lot with shamans in Mongolia and in these other parts of the world, and so maybe talk and share a little bit about your work as a Jungian psychoanalyst and the collective unconscious, and also relating it to the indigenous tribes that you have worked with, and finding what are the commonalities there, and what can we learn from these ancient practices.
Well, commonality, I always call Jung the shaman of the psyche, which he was. The shamans and Jung have everything in common. They pay attention to dreams. They have a process for attaining enlightenment, as Jung describes too. The indigenous people are, they have an aim in their psyche, and the aim of the psyche is actually, there is an ultimate aim in the psyche as described by Jung, which is to attain wholeness. So I found all the Jungian concepts in indigenous people I've worked with peoples all over the world, from the Arctic Circle to the tribes, yes, as you say, of the steppes of Russia or America, South America, Laos, all over the world. I've met shamans. Everything, they all have everything in common. The same process, the same structure, the same path to attainment that we don't have in our Western culture. We don't have a common collective path to attainment, but the indigenous people do. That's as Jung did.
What would you say are some of the blocks or obstacles that are keeping the way that we think in the West and the modern world from moving into deeper states of consciousness?
The problem with the modern world is we only have an ego, and we don't know we have an unconscious. Of course, the ego is only the point of the iceberg. Afterwards, the rest of the iceberg is the personal unconscious. Then the ocean is the collective unconscious. And beyond that, the psychoid spheres, what Jung calls the psychoid spheres, are the cosmos. So the problem with modern man is the ego gets saturated, as he is today. A one-sidedness in our way of thinking, in our mindset, leads to saturation. So what's happening today is that our whole way of life is saturated, and it has actually swung into its own opposite. Total stillness all over the planet, total introversion all over the planet, time to take care of the soul, which people have forgotten because there's so much collective stress and so much reflexive response to that. So it's been a break. It's given the world a break. We see that nature is claiming her rights, with wild deer walking down the streets of Paris and so on. But yes, our collective unconscious is connected to Mother Earth. Mother Earth is an animated entity. She's alive. So as the unconscious can produce a nightmare Jung calls the dream of opposition, because the ego has a wrong attitude. So if collectively we have a wrong attitude, we're also going to create a nightmare. So as you said in another interview, this virus is a projection of our own shadow out in the world. It's our own disease, so we can claim it.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the shadow. You brought up a lot there. The shadow is an archetype of self. And I want to touch back on something you said earlier about Western culture, modern man, and the disease of modern man and of ego. And so as you were saying that, what really came to me is that in Western culture, we have two categories. We have the known and the unknowable. And we're always trying to make that which is unknowable known, and we want to decrease what we don't know, right? And so then there's this fight. It's polarized. I want to shine light on that which is hidden, right? However, in the indigenous cultures, the shamanic culture, in yogic culture, there's a third option, which is that which is unnameable, that which is unknowable. So you have the known, the unknown, and the unknowable. We cannot know something that is mysterious. There's a secret to the universe. There's a secret to life. And modern man is so presumptuous as to think that she could know that which is unknowable. And in this kind of striving, this grasping, this has created a culture of us trying to climb this imaginary ladder. It's a perception that we have. And so because of this perception, we've now fallen out of the natural rhythms with, like you said, the archetype of the mother, which is Mother Nature. So how do we, and then you mentioned about dreams, how do we as a collective then dream a new dream into becoming versus have this nightmare continue on, right? And I think that really comes into the biology of fear and phobias, and how we can unravel that. So what does Jung say about the evolution of fear and how it served us as humanity, and how do we break through that so that we can get out of a nightmare that we're creating on the personal level that will then project itself into the collective.
Well, I come back to the ego. Fear is ego-based. Beyond the fear, there is no fear. If you go further and deeper into the unconscious, there is no fear. And that's one of the aims of the whole process of individuation, is to get beyond the fear. And Jung pretends that we can't get beyond anything, because we can get to that cosmic space where psyche opens, and that is actually natural for our psyche to open. But we don't know it, of course. And you talk about the unknown. Well, yes, the aim of contacting the unconscious is to bring the darkness to the light and keep going. And then at one point, there is what Jung calls the psychoid spheres, which is beyond image and beyond form, but it's a sensation of energy, pure energy. And that's the zone of what you probably call the nameless, the unnamed.
Yeah. And that can only be experienced versus known from what we perceive knowing to come from, which is really the logical mind. And I think in the West, there's such a limited understanding of what knowing, how we can know something. We associate knowing from simply the brain, but there's other places in which we can receive information, receive knowledge from, which it can be from the body, from our emotional life, right? There's so many other ways to experience reality.
Yes. Well, knowingness also comes from the heart. Real knowingness is not of the mind. The mind tries to structure knowingness. The mind is only here to relate to matter and to organize matter. But when you take the mind away, then you're in a cosmic dimension.
So then what is the purpose of having symbols and form then? So in the collective unconscious, there have been studies done, like in England, for example, where they did these tests on children where a third of the children were afraid of snakes, yet there are not many snakes in the Isle of, in the UK, right? They don't really exist there. So yet, Jungian psychoanalysts would attribute that to the collective unconscious because there's symbols and snakes that have been then passed through the DNA, right? And then these stories are then accumulated as phobias and fears and are generationally passed down. So how does the role of symbols, what is the role of symbols then if eventually it doesn't matter to come in contact with the formless and the unnameable, the unknowable, but yet we experience our reality so much through the form and through religious spiritual symbols or the symbol of a snake? What is the point?
Well, yes, our psyche needs images. Psyche speaks in images. If you dream, you don't dream in words, you dream in images. So the food for the psyche itself is images. A snake is it's a cold-blooded animal, so it comes from a deeper level of the psyche. And it's an expression of fear, but a snake can also be transformation, a symbol of transformation. The snake sheds its skin. So if the snake is brought to the surface, I've had children who have suffered from snake phobias. And we have integrated the snake as a symbol, and then the phobia drops away. I can explain that with a case of a child of 3.5. She had night terrors, and the thing about night terrors is that once the child wakes up, the room is still animated with the object of the terror. So she had snakes all over the floor of her room, and she was trying to climb the wall. She was an absolutely terrified child. So what we did, I have sandboxes, we work with sand therapy. What we did was make a snake and colored it and made a physical snake, and she would bring it to bed and sleep with it. So the positive tamed side of the snake depotentiated the negative side of the snake. And she gave her snake a name. He was called Yuki, and she found peace. But a symbol has to be worked on. It has to be integrated. Integration leads to healing. If you just leave a snake as it is, I mean, a snake can run through her whole life as a phobia. But if we can integrate, it's about integration.
Yeah. So what are some things that you're seeing come up in Switzerland with the people around you, your clients, colleagues, in terms of nightmares or symbols of nightmares that are coming up quite a bit because of what's happening? And how do we then empower new symbols, or perhaps symbols that have a shadow archetype to it, and empower them with truth, so that we can move forward? What are some things that you're seeing right now?
Well, it's the energy in the symbol that counts, really. I have people who dream of sharks. We don't have any sharks in Switzerland. Sharks are a symbol of in their nightmares. It's something that comes from the depths and can bite or kill. So our virus is also something that comes from the depths that can bite or kill. Psyche can be premonitory. Psyche is mostly compensatory. It can be oppositional, like I just said, in nightmares. We can reach archetypal levels in the psyche. You can dream you're a pharaoh in ancient Egypt that's outside of personal experience, so that's an archetypal dream. And then we have premonitory psyche, where we can anticipate what's coming. And actually, before this lockdown, a lot of people anticipated that we were going into a very narrow curve, that something was going to happen. They didn't know what. I don't know if you felt that too, Johnson. But a lot of people had this anticipation, this premonitory feeling that something was going to happen. I don't know if you experienced that too.
Energetically, I was so tunnel visioned. I definitely was in a tunnel, so that's definitely narrow. So I don't necessarily perceive things from the future in that sense with dreams, because my relationship to dreams, before all this happened, is a little bit, it's like a purposeful forgetting almost. There's almost no space for it, because there has been so much of a doing in the air, so much of, I need to fulfill a purpose, I need to be of service, I need to do this, I need to do that. And now that we're in such a polar opposite of receiving, my dreams are a lot more vivid. So as you're talking about archetypal dreams, yeah, now I'm receiving quite a lot more, and some would call it a download. And archetypal dreams of different people in my life representing different things, and I'm remembering them to greater degrees after I wake up. And since you did bring up the subject of dreams, and we were talking about archetypes, and kind of lend itself to each other, let's talk a little bit about how the power of dreams. So when we're, let's say, dreaming a dream that could feel like a nightmare, for example, 2 nights ago I had this dream where there were conflicting archetypes, different representations of people from my life in this reality were taking form in a shadow aspect in the dream, and there was conflict. There was a sense of nostalgia, a deep desire to go back to how things were, and a great feeling of loss. And so as I was dreaming this was a cycle that happened over and over again. So it actually made me physically tired when I woke up. And I was very much aware that I was dreaming. And so at a certain point in the dream, I knew I had a choice to change and shift the dream, but yet I was not able to in that, because my experience with dreams is that sometimes I'm so I get taken and swept almost like a wave, carrying you away into the ocean. And so sometimes dreams can feel that way. And I think with the global situation in life can feel that way. So how do you make shifts in dreams? Because I know that a lot of the work with the shamanic work and also the Jungian work, when we start to shift the way we dream, whether sleeping or awake, we actually start making new ripples of change in consciousness. So what are some things that you do to anchor your consciousness into a vehicle of change when you're, let's say, in a loop in a dream?
Yeah. Well, yes, conflict in dream is something that can be resolved by rational input. Once you wake up, you write your dream, and you can continue the dream with active imagination. But the aim is to resolve an unresolved conflict that may come up now, even if it belongs to the past, because just now is the time. So we are not masters of that, when it's the right time to do what. But I think resolving conflict is something very important. What one does, you see, Jung says when you contact unconscious contents, the fact that they come to consciousness means that you can handle them. So if someone has a fear, and we have a symbol for that fear, once it comes to consciousness, we can deal with it. If fear has no image, it's just free-floating fear, then we have to find an image that belongs to the fear, and then we can handle it. Jung once had a soldier who was suffering from shrapnel during the war. And it's a very physical and psychological pain. So just the constant repetitive fear in the psyche of this man could not be resolved until he had a dream. And one day he dreamt that he was face to face with a lion, and the lion had its mouth wide open. And then he got the image. And once he had the image, he could deal with it. Now you've got a lion, you can kill it. You can do something with it in active imagination. You can bring it through a process. So yes, it's bringing into imagery, bringing unconscious contents to the surface. Every phobia, every fear, every trauma has a story that's stocked in the unconscious, and it has to be brought to light.
Yeah.
And once it's brought to light, we can deal with it. We can handle it. We can recycle the energy that's in it and go beyond. Jung calls that the transcendent function. And actually, it doesn't require analysis. It requires participation. Mm-hmm. You have a fear. You've got a shark in your psyche. He's attacking every night. So you have to bring it up to consciousness, what's happening, deal with it consciously, and it's the energy and the fantasy that moves things on. Yeah. You don't have to take the symbol and tear it to bits to see what's in it. You have to bring the fantasy, carry it further.
So let's look at some archetypes that are possibly coming up right now around money, around stability, because lots of people that I'm coming across in terms of clientele, people that I have known, are running up with this barrier of, okay, life is not normal right now, and I fear losing X, Y, and Z, all that I have accumulated. Now, in a zoomed out lens, when I tune into it, I see it as the fear of the dissolution of identity or ego, right? I've been a conscious entrepreneur, and I've built this, and I've had that, I've had these successes, these achievements, and now slowly things are being stripped from me. And so it feels a little bit like dying. And so that, of course, instills a little bit of a panic and a fear, because we can either choose to hold on for dear life to this identity that we have spent so many years creating, or we get swept by the flow and get washed downstream with it. And this is something that we have to address, not necessarily from the logical, analytical part of the brain that can compartmentalize, create files, and, like you said, analyze. This is something that we need to go into a creative mode, and work through, like you said, with active imagination. You work a lot with art therapy and giving, power to symbols, right? So how do we make this more of a priority? How important is it to use art, to use things that work more in the mythological, on the creative spheres, instead of, the analytical spheres, to break through a lot of the things, the crap that we're moving through right now?
I think you hit a very good point, Johnson. It does feel like dying, and we're definitely in the throes of the death archetype. And I invite people to die, because it's the way through. Because in face of death, there's such a resistance that the ego is totally blocked. But dying in the archetype of death itself, one finds another dimension, which you know all about. The other side of dying is rebirth. So even in the Gospels or the Scriptures, they invite you to lose everything. Lose it, die, go for it. There's a gift on the other side. In shamanism, we have the death ritual.
Yeah, talk a little bit about that.
The death ritual is about really dying to everything you have, all the connections you have, everything you know. Now, the Inuits, they have it. We did a death ritual here recently with a Russian shaman from the Altai. With the Inuits, we have also a death ritual, and it's about a meditation on your skeleton, and you take the bones of your skeleton one by one and you throw them into the cosmos.
Ooh.
And it's an extremely deep meditation, and when you do it and there's absolutely nothing left, then you hit something just incredible.
I've done variations of a death ritual where it's more by fire. For me, death happens a lot by fire, but that sounds skeletons into cosmic space. That's a different kind of dying. That's almost like dissolving into the emptiness, into the void.
It's a dissolving, yes. And what's left is just exactly who you really are, which
is emptiness. And it's expansive, and it's vast.
Also energy, vibration, flow. It's emptiness on the level of ego and mind, but it's still an energy, a flow, an ecstasy.
This is a beautiful paradox, because this is the paradox where, the Buddhists would talk in the Tantra about having the both. The emptiness and the somethingness, and that when we empty to a certain degree, like, when we enter into the state of formlessness, something comes from that. Then a rebirth happens and form comes back again. Very similar to how you were talking about the child who was going through the phobia therapy with the snakes, how when we start to take the same somethingness, which is the symbol of the snake, and then infuse it with a different somethingness, it then empties out and nullifies the meaning of what the shadow archetype was for that child. And so we go constantly and we waver between the something and the nothing. And we have to remember from a larger perspective that we are moving through, we're kind of swinging between this 8, right? And we're kind of crossing this threshold where it feels like, yes, we are dying, not literally. To some people, yes, literally, but for most of us, it's a metaphorical death, and that we'll eventually swing back into the natural flow of things. And if we can remember the natural rhythm of how the universe works, then we won't get so caught up on the mundane, trivial things of I don't think about how I'm going to pay the rent. I really don't. I don't exist on that wavelength, and I just haven't existed like that in a very long time. The universe takes care of me that way. I think about other things. I focus my energies and my intention on how I'm of service, where I'm going to create the most impact for not just on a personal level, but also on a transpersonal level for others who will listen and others who are, on the same boat. Right. And I think that's where we really need to focus our intention, right? Otherwise we get caught in this nightmare loop. And that's not where we want to be.
Yeah. If we're only in fear of how we pay the rent, it's not living. Since the night of time, man has faced everything that life could possibly offer and survived. So yes, if we get stuck in fear at any level on any subject, the challenge is to get beyond the fear. Beyond the fear, there is no fear. But we don't know it. You see, we're not taught, we're not educated. We're taught maths and language in school, but we're not educated how to live life. We're not educated on the values of life. In the time of Alexander the Great, 323 BC, even then they had teachers. Alexander had Socrates as a teacher who taught him the values of life. And that was education. In ancient Greek, we had teachers who taught people about life, how to live life, what were the values of life. We don't have that dimension anymore at all. We go to school to learn, but it's only mind stuff. We don't go to school to learn about life.
So it's like we almost need to readapt the education system to have courses on intuition, to have right, instead of just being so left-brained about things. And I think that's why alternative self-development courses out there that are not as mainstream, meditative courses on tantra, courses on Buddhist scripture, courses on Jungian psychology, all of these things are coming to the forefront now in self-development because people are craving a deeper connection to the aspect of themselves that they feel have been neglected through formal education.
Our religion has lost its dogmatic religion, has lost its power to convince. So people are looking for what Jung says, the homo religiosus within. Because there's an aspect of psyche that is naturally religious. And religious means religare. Religare in Latin means connectedness. So the true religion is connectedness. Connectedness opens everything. It opens the mind, opens the heart, opens the psyche, opens the world, allows the anima mundi to come back in. The anima mundi is the soul of the world. We've forgotten all about it since the Middle Ages. We don't even have a name for it anymore. Sure, astrophysicians talk about plasma. But anima mundi in the Middle Ages was a permanent presence. The soul of the world was a permanent presence. So we have to re-educate, we have to remodel. Psyche will do it. Psyche will help. The unconscious has an intention about life and mankind. The collective unconscious has an intention about mankind's path. And is actually being manifest at the moment through nature. And we have to pay attention. We will be carried on the waves of the ocean of the unconscious, that's for sure. So there's no point in worrying about the rent, but worrying about how we are in the ocean. What do we feel like when we're riding the wave? At the bottom of the wave, the crest of the wave. That's what we really, really want. That's what everybody
It's like what one of my teachers says, why worry about things that are going to take care of itself tomorrow? Right?
That's right.
When there are other things that are a lot more important to worry about.
Exactly.
I just got a check in the mail from the Singapore government for giving me, and I don't live in Singapore anymore, and they gave me a tax rebate because I paid too much tax. Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, universe.
Life is providing, and it's
Life is
true.
perfect.
Life provides. Life
Yeah.
provides.
Yeah.
But we're not taught that. We don't have that education. Life provides. Yeah. The unconscious in mankind has an intention, and we can follow it. We can believe in it. We can give it. We can have confidence in it. I have total confidence in the intention in the unconscious today. And I find that people during this time of introversion, people are having huge shifts in their psyche. People are having really big dreams. And as you say, people are looking for that connection that they didn't have time and space to look for before. But in this time of confinement, they're definitely connecting differently. And that can influence the world. You know, the small can influence the big. I think it's Greta Thunberg who says that a tiny voice can influence the whole world. And it's true. Yeah, we can all influence. Our participation influences.
Yeah, I mean, it's the micro and the macro, and it's that relationship in quantum physics that talks about how, one drop in the ocean is going to cause a ripple throughout the entire fabric of consciousness, and it has a direct impact.
That's really true.
Yeah.
That's really true.
Well, we can go on and on about consciousness and about Jung and about the collective. If you were, let me just ask one last question before we close this. If you were, let's say, channeling in Jung, and you were really pulling in his essence, and you imagined that he was, sitting here, right here with you in Switzerland, what would he be saying about what is happening right now and where we need to go as a species for evolution?
He is here, of course. He's clapping his hands. He's very happy that man is at last challenged to think about his way of life and what is essential. I think Jung is rejoicing in the skies with what's happening. Man is in the polarity, and Jung would say that his task is to bear the tension of that polarity. He did say, for as long as man can bear the tension of the opposites, that's his true task. And that's where he will survive, over and beyond whatever is presented to him. So that's what I think. That's what Jung's channeling right now.
And that's such a beautiful mirror of, one of the essential principles of Buddhism, which is really coming into the middle way. Because, the Buddha said life is suffering, which doesn't mean that, oh, boo-hoo, woe is me, pity me, and like all the bad shit happens to me. But it's just that shit happens in life. Life is unfolding on itself. And so stuff happens, rocks fall, tsunamis come, people die, right? And so as this happens, we can create the relationship we want in and through and with life, right? So we can either place ourselves in the middle way, or we can be swinging along the pendulum forever and ever and ever through the extremes of heightened emotion and going through grief and depression and then rising up into joy and elation and then back down again. But can we find and exist in the middle way, right? How do we participate, right, with life in a way that doesn't swing us and rip us apart, right, through the polarities? Is that what you're kind of saying? Like to create the tensions of life, but staying grounded and centered in the middle of all the tensions of opposition. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, absolutely. And one has to resolve that tension. Like I said before, beyond the fear, there is no fear. That's the aim. The aim in the psyche. The psyche has desire. Desire is not of the mind. Desire is deeper. It's of the soul. And desire really wants to attain that middle way, that place of light. Desire, it's not linked to any object, real desire. It's linked to the desire to be whole, to oneness, and it's not attached to anything. So many people desire, but they can't put words to it. But man's psyche does desire. It desires to move on, to get beyond the fears, to get beyond the blockages, the stuckness, get beyond what's only ego, and to go deeper, go wider, and feel that vastness that's always there. It's always there. It's not something that disappears. It's permanent. And when we know it, then that's all we have to do. Know it and desire it.
Simple.
The greatest words are simple. The greatest things that ever are simple. Yeah.
Simple, but not easy to do sometimes. We have to unravel all that we have come into this world with, and
we can recognize that the ego spins on its stuff. And the part of us that's looking at that ego that's spinning on its stuff is not in the ego, it's outside the ego.
Yeah.
So we can connect with that. It's a first tool.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for spending this time with me on this Monday evening here in Sydney and afternoon for you in Switzerland. Me and Patricia were supposed to run a retreat together in Switzerland in August. Now we can't because of the world situation, but that's okay. We're connecting digitally, and it's so lovely to hear your voice and to chat with you. If you want to learn more about Patricia's work and using art therapy and her Jungian psychoanalysis work, check out her book, A Jungian Approach to Spontaneous Drawing, A Window on the Soul. And feel free to reach out.
And Facebook as well. I'm on Facebook.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Johnson. It's been lovely talking to you. I look forward to it next.
Yeah. Alrighty.
You take care.
You too.
Namaste.
I'll talk to you soon. Namaste.
Namaste.
Right,
Thank
bye.
you. Bye.